One of our favorite Disney couples of all time has got to be Ariel and Eric from Disney's The Little Mermaid. We love the idea that Ariel was so fascinated by land and life on it that she ended up coming across and falling in love with someone who seems to be a genuinely good guy. But there is something that we didn't really realize in the movie. If you take a closer look at some of the logistics when it comes to The Little Mermaid, you actually end up realizing that Ariel inadvertently ruined Eric's whole life after she convinced him to fall in love with her. And notice how we use the word convinced. That's right, we think that whether she knew about it or not, Ariel might have been using her enchanted voice to sway Eric into acting on something other than free will over the course of the entire film. And I know what you might be thinking, Ariel didn't have a voice when they met. But just wait, because that might not even matter when you bring Ursula into the equation. Now, we all know that Disney is no stranger to the idea of love at first sight, and it's a trope that they have used in tons of their movies. And at first glance, it would seem like the budding romance between Eric and Ariel fit right in on that list. But after a closer look at some things that happen throughout the movie, along with folklore about merpeople, there seems to be a more twisted system to the couple seeming to fall in love. As you know, Ursula, the evil octopus sea witch, wanted Ariel's voice, and it would make sense that she would want it for a very specific reason. The most accepted theory as to why she wanted to take Ariel's voice in the first place is that she knew that it held magical properties of a sort. And that would make sense because another mythological creature that is synonymous with a mermaid is a siren. And I'm sure you have heard the story behind what the siren song is. It's specifically a song that has particular tones that only a mermaid princess could emit that causes men to bend to her will. The most common mentioning of sirens comes from old sailor lore, and they would often hold sirens responsible for the deaths of other sailors. It would often be told that the sirens would sing to the sailors to lure them in, sink their ship, and cause them to drown. And even though it's something that they never specifically mention in the movie, it would make a lot of sense for Ariel to have the same enchanting voice as in the old myths. She was, after all, a mermaid princess, meaning she might have had an amazing voice even if she wasn't in a Disney movie. Think about it though, this would explain why Ursula would have been trying so hard to get her tentacles on Ariel's voice. Without her voice, Ursula probably assumed that Ariel would have absolutely no chance at winning over Eric's love. Little did Ursula know, Ariel already had her vocal grips into Eric as he heard her voice subconsciously earlier in the film. Do you remember when the sailor almost drowns and has to be saved by Ariel? Ariel dragged Eric to the shore and then sang to him before being scared off by Grimsby and Max. This means that there's a chance that Ariel unknowingly pulled a Sanderson sisters and put a spell on him, and now he was hers. However, as we all know, Ursula does manage to get Ariel to give up her voice, which definitely made things awkward at first for Eric and her. But then, when Ursula shows up as Vanessa, she's using Ariel's voice, which is why Eric was immediately drawn to her. It had him so mesmerized that he was willing to marry Ursula literally the second that he heard her speak. Now, we aren't saying that Ariel lured Eric in with her voice maliciously like in the old sailor myths, but we do believe that there is a good chance that her voice was enchanted throughout the entire movie. In other words, Eric had been being controlled by both Ariel and Ursula, meaning that not once when we saw him in the movie with either of the two was he acting out of his own free will. This also means that by the end of the movie, he might have never really fallen in love with Ariel. It might have all been because of her siren song. Now, we will admit there are still a few doubts about this being a possibility because, as we said, there is a point in the movie when Eric meets Ariel on land and she is without a voice. And yes, he does seem to still be falling for her despite being under the spell of her cursed song. In fact, it even seemed like he genuinely wanted to kiss her of his own accord. However, think about how quickly he dropped Ariel for Vanessa as soon as he heard her voice. You don't just cast aside someone you genuinely have feelings for over a voice unless that voice has a magical grip on you. But Disney tends to end on a more positive note, and I'm sure we were all elated to see that Eric did end up with the Princess Ariel. However, the two didn't get back together until Ariel was back in possession of her voice, which begs the question, was Eric really in love with her? Or was it her voice working its mermaid magic? Because if he is under some sort of love trance, that really puts an asterisk next to the whole true love definition. And even if Ariel wasn't aware of her powerful voice, it still doesn't mean that Eric wasn't under some sort of love spell, making it kind of twisted whether she knew about it or not. And don't worry though, Ariel's quest to unwittingly destroy Eric's kingdom didn't stop there. Whether or not you believe that Ariel had an enchanting voice that was able to entice the prince into falling in love and marrying her, there is a really good chance that their marriage would have spiraled the kingdom into turmoil. I mean, think about where Eric lives and how a lot of his people make a living there versus where Ariel comes from. Ariel, who was a mermaid, came from the sea, where she had countless friends who were all fish and other marine life. Well, Eric's kingdom is a coastal one, and he himself is a sailor and a fisherman, meaning that the majority of his kingdom's economy is based on and around the catching, selling, and eating of fish that they catch from Ariel's home. So if Ariel were to decide that she wanted the kingdom to become like her and be fish-friendly, that would mean she would have to put her foot down and put an end to all of the fishing and murdering of her friends, which in turn would cripple the kingdom, its people, and its economy. And as much as I hate to put a damper on their otherwise twisted but happy ending, this seems like the most likely scenario. I mean, we have to figure that when Ariel became a human and married Prince Eric, even though she was adapting to their human mannerisms, it's highly doubtful that she would just do a 180 and be like, yes, let's eat my friends. She probably wouldn't even let them continue fishing, because why would she ever want to put her friends and family at the risk of being on the end of one of their hooks? You remember the kitchen scene as well as I do. While Louis is doing his best to make dinner fit for Eric and his court, you can clearly see fish and crabs strewn all over the place. And not in tanks either. No, they're super dead. And before you go on thinking that there is even the slightest chance that mermaids would eat fish, which is an understandable thought since fish do eat other fish in the wild, that's probably not the case with Ariel, which we know because in the jam Under the Sea, Sebastian makes a really big deal about the fact that humans eat fish. He makes it very clear that it is unacceptable behavior. So I would assume that the mermaids are underwater vegetarians of sorts who eat kelp and other marine plants. So even though he was a sailor and most likely fished from time to time, even if it was only his hobby, he would no longer be allowed to do so. And I can understand going broke over a diet, but giving up something you love to do because of it seems crazy. And if destroying their way of life wasn't enough, if you take into account the straight-to-video sequel, The Little Mermaid 2: Return to the Sea, they're forced to build a wall around their entire town just to protect their daughter. This would have cut off any other means of commerce that the kingdom might have had, only further plunging the economy down the drain. With the wall around the town, it made the fact that the kingdom is surrounded by ports and coastline useless, causing it to no longer be a popular trading area. So not only would all of the fishermen have been out of work, but any merchant or trader would have been out of luck too. There would have been no one from the outside world for them to trade with unless the people inside of the kingdom traveled. But then, what reason would they have to return at that point? They could just set up somewhere else. It looks like no matter what way you think about it, the city would collapse on itself, metaphorically. Either the economy would cause everyone to starve and suffer, or it would cause everyone to leave in hopes of finding a living for themselves and their families somewhere else. So, once again, Ariel's presence in the kingdom was doing more harm than good, whether she meant it to or not. So I guess the takeaway from all this is that Ariel, the Little Mermaid who was the princess of the entire underwater kingdom of Atlantica, and whether she was really in love or aware of the fact that she was forcing a man to love her, managed to completely destroy the life of an innocent and kind sailor. That's just wrong. The poor man just went out to sea expecting to hook some fish, but instead, Ariel flipped the script and used her voice to sink her hooks into him. The last thing we will leave you with is an interesting perspective shift. Imagine the equivalent of Eric being invited and somehow managing to live in Atlantica with Ariel and her people, and he decided to bring all of his surface garbage there and machines to help him survive that were simultaneously polluting and destroying the kingdom. Only that would never happen because Eric didn't have a magical voice to persuade Ariel with. Do you want to know what the real kicker here is, though? That voice really does mess up the idea of love, whether or not he fell in love with her with or without the voice. Even if Eric got sick of Ariel and the fact that he had to stop pursuing his hobby while watching his kingdom crumble around him, there isn't anything he could have done about it. Think about it. He wouldn't be able to leave her even if he wanted to. Even if he managed to resent her for all that she potentially did and ruined for him, there would be no way for him to break away from her. So, at the end of the day, it looks like the two would have either had a really toxic and horrible relationship or a codependent relationship. Either way, neither relationship types are healthy for anybody involved. But guess who would be left to suffer for this? The kingdom and their daughter Melody. And the worst part is, as we said, it might not even have been Ariel's fault for the whole situation. I mean, it's not her fault that she's a mermaid princess who comes with kung fu grip and enchanting voice action. It's just the way things would be according to the myth about sirens. At the end of the day, it seems like what started out as just a harmless crush might have resulted in a seemingly good and innocent person ruining Eric's life, and at the fault of no one. But what do you guys think? Do you think Ariel's voice was cursed to sing a siren song? And if she didn't know about it, does it make it okay for her to have used it on Eric? Be sure to let us know in the comments section below. As for now, That's all, Disney fans. Let us know what video you'd like to see next in the comments, and like and subscribe for more magically packed videos.